graphical user interface. Most of them providing both. They also are going to offer you packaged software downloads and updates for the different tools that are available with Linux, and then your desktop environment, which can be different even for the same distribution. There are several different desktop environments. There are several types of Linux distributions. The most common ones that you're going to see are going to be Debian-based, which would be like Kali, Ubuntu, things like that, and then RPM-based, which would be like your Red Hat, Fedora, CentOS, those types of distributions. And again, there are many, many others, and some of them are even just standalone distributions that are not based on another distribution. So again, the purpose of the distribution that you're going to choose is how you're going to choose it. What is it used for? There are education distributions. There are ones that are specific for coding, security, hacking, open source intelligence, you name it. Honestly, one of the biggest things that gets people into Linux is that they can do something that's very similar to a Windows or Mac, oftentimes, and for free. So there are distributions like that that give you that kind of user interface that does not differ that much from the world of Windows and Mac, but it is free. All right, so what's the difference between a graphical user interface and a command line interface? And which one do you want to use? Well, like I said, most of your distributions have both available at the same time. So this is going to depend on what you're trying to use it for. Most of the times, a graphical user interface is going to be just fine. Your GUI is going to be just fine. Point and click, right? And that works great. But sometimes there are some benefits to command line interface that make it easier to use for certain things. One, command line interface, whether you're talking about a Windows system, a Linux system, or any other Unix-based system such as Mac, is powerful. You can do just about anything in command line, or you can do anything in command line interface when you're interacting with a computer. Another thing, I said one-stop shopping there. What I mean by that is you could do anything, again, all in one spot, though. You just have to know the commands. And that's where your disadvantages come in. Having knowledge of the commands that you want, it can take a long time to develop that knowledge, develop that skill, and then even as you're learning, the amount of time that you spend on studying different commands to actually utilize them can take longer than it would to just go about it the typical GUI way. And then preference. Point and click's easy. A lot of people like that because it's easy. And also appeal. How's it look? What do people like about Windows? Some people like style, some people like ease of use. All of these things are important to your typical user, but those are some disadvantages you have to command line interface. There's no real style to it. You're looking at a bunch of words on a screen. Sometimes, most of the time, not even words. So let's get into using the command line interface, though. So our major purpose for this presentation was to get familiar with some commands for terminal with Linux, your more common commands. So we're going to go through that. But first, we need to become familiar with command line interface with terminal. And so we're going to start with CLI is actually accessed through terminal. Typically, there are other command line interface programs available, but your most common one on every Linux distribution is going to be terminal. Terminal is going to provide your shell. This is how you are going to interact directly with the computer. So the OS. This is how the user actually changes things in the computer. One thing that we see when we're in command line is directories. When you are in command line, no matter where you are in command line, you're in some directory at all times. And being aware of the directory that you are in can be very useful when you're trying to manipulate your computer in some way or another, saving files, creating files, changing configurations. Another thing that's important to that is going to be your user privileges. If your particular user is not a super user, you may not have the same privileges as, say, well, obviously root. Root has all privileges, and then other users that have that ability. One of the things we really need to be mindful of in command line, specific to Linux, is that it is case sensitive. Everything in terminal is case sensitive. If you don't put a capital where it's supposed to be a capital, you may end up making a new file instead of editing a file you wanted to edit. Or you may end up using the wrong option for a command and changing the way the command actually plays through. A couple of things that make it a little bit easier, though, is you have tab. Tab helps you to finish commands and words in terminal. Your tab button, if you start to type a command and you don't know how to finish it out, you click tab. Oftentimes it's going to provide you with the rest of it. And then it'll also do it for options, files, directories, different things like that. And then options. The different options that you have change how your commands actually end up playing out. So now I just have basically a large list of common commands over 2 different pages here. So what I'd like to do is take some of these and actually show you how they're used. Like I said, I have Kali open, and we're going to go through some of these different commands and just see what we can do with them. All right, very simple one to start with is cd. cd is change directory. Like I said, you're always going to be in a directory. And the directory that you're in is going to determine what you can do at that time, specifically to what files are in your directory. When you start out, you're in your own user directory or home directory, just starting out with terminal, and then if you want to move around, you can change your directory. So I'm just going to, real quick, we're going to do cd change directory, and we're going to go to my desktop folder, which is the desktop that you see for the GUI. Remember how I said that everything is case sensitive? Desktop in Linux is typically capitalized. So you got to remember to do that, or it won't be able to find that directory. So we're in the desktop, and now that we're in here, I want to try that next command. I want to try to make a new directory or a new folder in my desktop or on my desktop. So we're just going to do make directory, and we're just going to name the directory. So it's going to be .101. You see right there in the desktop, the folder just shows up. So now we have a new directory we can play with. put files in it. We can change the directory. And if you are in a directory and you want to go into a child folder in that, or child directory in that directory, all you need to do is type out that particular folder name rather than the full file path. So now we're inside of the Linux 101 folder, and we want to say create a new file. Now this is seems silly to just create a new file for, say, a Word document or something like that, or a text document, a .txt. But really, you can create any kind of file you want with this touch command. You can create a zip file, you can create a tar file, you can create a text file. But another thing you need to remember, though, is that your configurations are all text documents. So one of the things that you can do with this, if you are just creating new files, is you can create new directories for your configuration files, and then you just need to point the files that need to use that configuration to that new file. But first, let's just try creating a new file. So we're going to say touch, which is your create new file, and we're just going to say test.exe. Now, if we use another command, another common command, list or ls, it's going to show us that we have that text.exe in the folder. And if you want to go the GUI route, you can open up this folder and you can see the text.exe right there. So those are some pretty simple commands for working within a directory. Some other big ones you can use for moving about your directories and moving things throughout. Copy, move, as you can see there. Copy and move are exactly what they sound like. You can move a file from one directory to another. You would just type move, the file path, and then the new file path. And the file path is going to include the file that you want to move. Or you can actually move a file by saying move file, and then naming your directory you're moving from and directory you're moving to. Similar with copy, copy file, copy from to. So it's copy file from to. And then move can also be used for renaming a document. So if I want to say rename text.exe, I can just say move text.exe and give it a new name. I'll just change it to test.exe. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Now, it's in the same directory, as you can see there, but we've changed the name of it. It's a very simple way to rename a file using the move command. Another one that's very useful if you want to create a new document. Now, whenever you're creating a new document, if you want to touch create file or and then go into the file and edit it, you can do that. But you also have a text editor that works right here in your command line interface, and that is your typical VI text editor. Now, there are other ones out there, Nano, Jed, and a bunch of others. But the most common one that comes with every distribution pre-installed is going to be VI text editor. So a simple way to do that is just say VI text.exe, and then we're in here and we can edit it. We use I to insert, and we can just start typing away. And then if we wanted to save it, we would say colon, or I'm sorry, escape. Now we're no longer editing, colon, and then W is write, Q is quit, and now it's saved. And if we go in to edit it again, sorry, I just created a new document. And we see test is still there. So I'm just going to quit. If you just want to quit without saving, it's your colon and then Q bang or exclamation point. You quit without saving. Now we've created a document, moved it around, or not, we haven't moved it around, but we've moved it around in order to change the name. We've edited the document. Now we just want to remove it. We don't need it anymore. We want to delete it. A simple remove, and it is gone. Boom. Are there any questions so far?
I have a random question. What shell are you using, or is that within Windows?
Or
I am VirtualBox. Excuse me. Are you using VirtualBox?
VMware. It's within VMware.
Oh, VMware. Okay. Thank you.
I'm using VMware on a Windows machine. Any other questions?
If you don't, yeah, I went. So if you don't know all these commands, obviously people starting don't. Is it just like learning as you do it, or like, is there? I don't know how else you would learn the commands.
I was really hoping that somebody would ask this. There are several resources online. You can search it till you're blue in the face. There are a ton of resources available online. Google searches will provide you with basic to intermediate to expert level command line interface or terminal commands. But one of the best ways to go about it is your man pages. Is everybody aware of what those are?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, so your man page is manual, right, for all your commands. So, what manual page do you want? So we can do one of the commands that we've done. So we do. Sorry. And there's the man page for the list command. And what this does is it offers us what the name of it is, how you would type it out. So it says there ls option and then file. So you can do option and then you can do a file. So you can list what's in a specific directory. You can list what's in your current directory. And then all these options are available, right? So your description, list information about the files in the current directory. And then we can keep going through pressing the space bar, and you see all the different options available and what they do. So man pages are extremely helpful when learning commands, what they do, how they can help, and then what kind of options you can use to actually modify it. Does that answer your question?
It does. What was the command that you did to bring that up? ls?
And then it's man.
Oh, man out. Okay.
So man is your man pages, and then the command that you want to look up. So, do you have any other questions about that?
Not me.
Awesome. All right. So another thing I want to introduce you to is super user. Does everybody know what a super user is?
Nope.
All right. So your super user is really important. Your super user is the one that's able to do everything. And there are ways to make sure that you are the super user. Basically, there's groups that you can be added to, different permissions that you have as a user. I'm not going to get into that because that's actually kind of advanced system administration. But the important thing to know is that when you create a user, because you shouldn't be using root as I'm doing right now, you shouldn't be using root, just logging into root and using that as your main account. Root should be reserved for different things like you can use it to unlock administrative accounts, use it to change your system as you see fit, restore your system, deal with issues, troubleshooting, that kind of thing. So if you regularly use your root account, you can screw it up, and you can also lock out your root account. Typically, you're not going to do that, but you can lock out your root account, and if you do that, then you're kind of screwed. There are ways to get around it. if you don't know how to log into your root account, but and they're not that difficult, the hacks, but it depends on the system you're using, which distribution. But the super user is very important. There are a lot of things as your typical Linux distribution is going to require super user in order to actually shut down the machine in command line interface or restart, reboot. So your typical machine, if you just wanted to go in as a normal user and say halt, which is your command to stop, to shut down, or reboot, your command to restart, it's going to say you can't do that. However, if you type in sudo, which stands for super user do, it's sudo. So that is just that, and so sudo, and then you start typing your commands. It'll ask you for your sudo login, and if you are a sudo super user, listed as a sudo super user, it'll just be your typical login password, and you can go about doing that command. Now, if you want to actually go into your command line and then switch to root, you would just type. Let's see. This depends on the distribution. I don't remember what it is with Kali, but
Can you make that any bigger?
I can. I'm sorry. I'm half.
No, it's okay.
With my commands, so that I remember which ones I wanted to go over.
I like this much better than VirtualBox because that you cannot make. It's very annoying to make bigger.
How's that? Better?
Yeah, that's much better.
Huh. All right. But your super user, you just type. It depends. You'd have to look it up for your specific distro, but it's typically something to do with the shell and SU. It doesn't matter. I can't actually upgrade to super user because I'm in root, so I couldn't really show you how it works right now, and I don't have another account on here yet to do that. So, but also as a super user, you can, like I said, unlock other accounts, but you can create other accounts, create other users, change passwords, that kind of thing for any other user. You can also do it with the sudo command as a sudo user. So the command for super user is su if you want to actually go in and become root in command line while you're logged in as a different user. However, if you want to just play the part of super user while still logged into your own without going into root, you just type in sudo and then the command, and then it's just running super user for that specific command. Does that make sense?
I think so.
All right. Let's see. Second here. All right. So in a Windows system, how would you check your in command prompt? How would you check your IP data?
ipconfig.
Ipconfig, absolutely.
That was a random guess.
In Linux is very similar. It's ifconfig. So that's another useful one, obviously. Now, just like ipconfig, ifconfig has all kinds of options available that you can man page for. And see all different options. You can actually go through and try to figure out what kind of information you're trying to bring up with that. So that's a very useful one. And then for system information, it's uname Linux. And then again, you can use different options to decide what kind of information you actually want to bring up there. Okay, I was just reading through the chat. All right, let's see what other ones did I want to go through. So cat is very useful. Does anybody know what cat does? All right. So for cat stands for concatenate, and really all it's telling it to do is to show the contents of the file, not to go into the editor to actually edit the contents, but just to show them print out on the screen right there. So let's create a document real quick, and then say all right, and we see our new document there. We can concatenate that with cat test.txt, and it just prints it out right there on the screen. You see what's in the file.
John
That's
has a
useful.
question. Yeah.
You were going to ask what that's useful for?
No, I was going to tell you that somebody had a question.
Oh, somebody has a question.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. I love questions.
They just wanted to know what you would use Linux for.
Oh, what you would use Linux for. So really, it's a preference thing, but as I said, you have several different purposes that different distributions are good at. Again, there are educational distributions. Oh, not give money to Microsoft. That's a good answer. Yeah, it's free. That is the reason that it's used in probably over 90% of 80 to 90% of servers that run the internet. And also, you have Android operating system is a Linux-based operating system, is also free, which is again why a lot of users decide to use that. And then Ray came up with a great answer there. They do come pre-installed with tools, and that really depends on the distribution that you're using. But different distributions have different purposes. So the one I'm using, Kali is an ethical hacking tool hog, essentially. There are so many tools that they provide just base installation for hacking, just to learn more about hacking and to do more hacking. Another one that I've just started playing with called Buscador is used for open source intelligence. Nice. And then I'm actually starting my son on some that are educational. So there are a bunch of kids Linux distros too. Maximize which window? Am I still sharing? Yeah. All right.
Probably the command.
I could do that too.
Yeah.
Boom.
Oh, there you go.
Is that even better?
Yes.
All right. All right. So we talked about halt and reboot. Did that answer the question though? Sorry. Awesome. All right. So you have some search options too when you're talking about Linux commands. So one of the ways that you can search through your directories and try to find a specific type of document is locate. Locate actually looks for letters and words, numbers. Sometimes it can get quite ridiculous if you just type in like 1 or 2 characters and then locate. It's going to list so many different documents. But you can also, again, use options for that. One of the options you can use would be tech I ignores case. so you wouldn't have to worry about whether or not it's uppercase or lowercase in the file. That is one of very few instances you don't have to worry about case. And even then, you have to worry about it because you got to remember to put in the option. But locate also offers a ton of other options too. You can specify what exactly you're looking for. You can use Boolean operators with locate to actually find files that say, that use this and this, but not that. That kind of stuff. Another option for searching, though, is called grep. Now, what grep does is it searches using patterns. So it'll look for different patterns of characters that you can actually use it to search for patterns that happen over and over again in a file. You can search a file, or you can search a directory for specific groups of characters, specific patterns. And it's really useful because if you're trying to, say, edit a file and you have this one pattern that just shows up several times and it's wrong, and you grep it in that file, it'll highlight all the instances where that pattern is in the file. Let's see, some connection stuff for, say, troubleshooting. Ping, obviously. I assume everybody knows what a ping is. If not, please let me know. But essentially just a connection test. You can ping the name of a server or a website and have it resolve with DNS if you have DNS installed, or you can ping an IP address, and all it's going to give you back, as long as you don't use any options, all it's going to give you back is the results of that ping, how long or how many pings it sent, how many responses you got, and how long it took to get those responses. And then let's see. I couldn't even get through all the ones that I wanted to do. Are there any commands that you guys have questions about? Any things you want to learn on how to do specific in command line? Typing commands. Oh, okay. I think I know what you're saying. So I am not very skilled in that. I did a little bit of it with the Red Hat course recently. But basically you're talking about using command within a command. Does that sound right? Adam, does that sound right? And then the output of a ping into writing a file, things like that. Okay. Yeah, so you can use a pipe for that, and I don't know if everybody knows what a pipe is, but it's very simple. You got your backslash or whack up there underneath your backspace. If you shift and hit that, that's a pipe. But that is a little more, piping commands is a little more advanced than the basic stuff I was looking to go over today, so I didn't really get into that. But it is very, very simple. So you can take a ping and, like he was saying, write it into a text file or print the results somewhere else, essentially. But there are a ton of other things you can do with it too that I really don't think we're going to have time to cover today. That is a great question, though, and I am definitely going to research it more. One thing I didn't mention that I probably should have, it's a pretty important one. So remember how I said about packages. So it packages software for you, and then so Linux distributions will package software for you for download and install. that are compatible with their specific distro. But one of the ways that you can do this with command line, when you're talking about getting new files and downloading and installing them, you can use the apt command. Now, apt by itself is just going to take you into the different repositories, which repository is what holds all the software and updates for different distros that are updated regularly. And you can also set up your system, depending on what system you have, to do automatic updates like a Windows system. But if you want to really control what you're downloading, what updates you're downloading and installing, you can do that in here. Or if you just like to do it manually, you can do it yourself. But apt, what it does is actually get you in there to actually play with the repositories. You can list the different packages that are available, different information about the packages, that kind of stuff. But if you want to actually install them, you want to do aptget that's to download. And then if you want to actually install a package, you just hit install. And then you type the name of the package. It's going to check all the repositories that you have in your configuration files, which hopefully you don't have many, depending on your distro. Most distros frown on using too many different repositories because the repositories themselves are built for the distribution, and so other files can actually corrupt your install. But not that you can't install other files just off the internet like you normally would, depending on what web page you're drawing from. But this is a way to get ones that are built for that distro or are compatible with that distro. If you want to just update what you have already, a simple way to do that is aptget update. It'll go through and just update everything that you have from your repositories. It's going to check them first, and then it would do downloads and installs as necessary. You see, I don't have anything to update right now. One way that you can look for upgrades, now these are a little bit different because upgrades, vice updates will actually also remove software that's no longer valid. So it's going to look for software updates, but it's also going to look for software that is not supported anymore and remove that. So if you wanted to do that, you would just do aptget tac-y, and then the tac-y is an option that allows you to just bypass. Later on, there's a question asking you if you're sure, essentially, if you want to do this, and you yes or no. Tac-y is yes. It just bypasses that, so you don't have to answer it later. And then you would hit enter. I'm not going to do that right now because it actually takes a while to run through the process, even if there's nothing to upgrade. Adduser. Good. That is true. Okay. All right. So great question. Why they give you GUI option if you're using command line is more useful? It's simple. These are all built to preferences, right? So all the different distributions are built for specific purposes or to reach a specific crowd, and it's you deciding what you want. So even down to the desktop environment, I prefer a GNOME environment. Some people prefer, oh man, what are the other ones, like KDE, whatnot. And so that, it really depends on what you're looking for. There are some downloads you can get for certain distros that are bare bones and really only use command line, and that would be when you actually install the when you actually go through and do the install. It gives you the option to only install a command line interface. But the GUI option is there for people who prefer to use that. It's easier for them. Adduser. Yeah, sudo adduser username. That is exactly how you would do it. So sudo if you're not actually logged in as root at the time, to do that command, that specific command as a super user, sudo adduser username. There's a lot more to it that you can do that would change your options. Like you can add the permissions in right there. You can do the password change right there, all in the same command. That gets a little more complicated, but just know that adding a user is pretty simple. Sudo adduser username would be exactly how you do it. So I want to just said I don't have another user. Well, I don't need the sudo. I'm in root, but. Boom. Now I do my new password and retype. Oh. Boom. And now there's a new user that I can log in as Nicholas M. Dzienis. Does that answer your question, Maria? I think it was? Yeah. Awesome. So I don't really have much more to present. If we get back to the presentation. And this is my last page. And as you saw from how many different angles and how many different paths we went down just talking about it, there is a lot more to learn. This was meant to be just a basic cover of like what Linux is, what options you have, and how the command line basics work. But if you are interested in learning more about Linux, I definitely recommend getting into doing research, asking questions, and playing with it is the biggest thing. Download some virtualization software, VMware VirtualBox, and then run your machines through there using virtual machines and play with it as much as you can. Are there any questions?
I have one. I don't know if you'll be able to answer it though. Okay, so I haven't used yet, but I have downloaded Linux for, hacking and open source intelligence that I'm going to be doing. But if you're not into that and you open Linux and you want to learn more, what is something you could do in it without just like looking up a command and doing the command? Like, is there something they could aim for as they open it?
So that's what you want to do, really. So there are, you remember how I said there are a lot of resources online? Well, there are actually resources online that give you like scripts you can go through and whatnot, just practicing this, learning Linux commands. And you can do it that way. Or you can literally look for what it is you want to do with your system and look for those commands and follow those tutorials and learn more about what the commands are and what they do. I wouldn't just say, all right, this is, go look for what you want and then type it in exactly and don't worry about what it says. Look into it. Like, you'll get the full command line, what you want, and you should know what every piece does before you actually implement it. And that's where your man pages come in very handy. Any other questions? All right, well, that's all I have for today. Stop sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. For coming out and listening to me babble.
So I recorded it. I recorded it a little late.
Yeah,
so the first.
I thought I hit it, and
no.
thought I didn't.
So the first part is I think it's the
Back-
first slide, but then the rest is in there. So it's going to come, pretty abrupt. But
Yep.
if you weren't here, you're lost.